Coming up on Tech Talk, is it really worth fixing a 5, 6, maybe 7-year-old computer? Well, we're going to find out. That's coming up right now. Okay, first I had to diagnose what the problem was with this particular computer. It wouldn't boot up. So I opened up the side panel, started it up, the fan spun and then just stopped. And nothing, couldn't hear hard drive, nothing. So what I did was I took another power supply, and that's what I checked first. I happened to have an extra power supply that would fit. And once I put that one in, it did the same thing. And it wasn't getting any video out. I determined it was the motherboard. That's what I started my journey to search for the motherboard. Okay, before we go any farther, we have to find out if it's worth fixing, is if you have to find out if the parts are available. The particular computer that I am fixing, I know it's at least a dual-core CPU. It's not a dual-core, or newer I should say. I wouldn't even mess with it. I found it on eBay. I did a search of the model number. And if you're going to do this, find the model number. It's usually on the computer case. It could be underneath it, on the back of it. Dell's, I think, are on the back or on the top. The other thing you need to do is open the case up and get that motherboard number off that motherboard. There's a unique number on there. And what I did is I did a little research on eBay and happened to find one, and it was reasonable. It was like 25 bucks, and the fellow was selling the motherboard with the compact case. Waiting for it right now to arrive. Shipping was a little expensive, but I'm under 60 bucks right now. And the thing you got to keep in mind, if you go much over $100, it's not worth fixing it unless it was a really, really expensive computer in its day. But still, over $100. If you don't need a monitor or a mouse or a keyboard, you can buy a decent computer for $200 to $300 now. So it wouldn't be worth it. I wouldn't upgrade anything less than a dual core, just because of the way the software is written now. And if it's going to take a long time, if you're not that experienced, it might be too much of a hassle. But this is in case you like to tinker around and you can find the parts. Let's get started. The next thing you have to do is, of course, disassemble everything on the old system. Now, if you're putting in the exact same board and you're just going to move the CPU and the RAM and the hard drive and everything, it should be all plug and play. Plug everything together. You won't have to reload the system because it's the same motherboard. It'll think it's the same system. So now that you've opened the case, now it's just a matter of unplugging all your connections. Starting, this one has power to the CPU, main power to the motherboard, the hard drive, and the DVD connections. The front sound panel and USB ports. And then, of course, the main, right down here is the main system power and lighting on the board. So you can leave your RAM, your CPU, and everything else alone. And one other thing I forgot to mention, a lot of these have proprietary screws or just computer specific for computers and motherboards. And I happen to have a tool because I've been doing these upgrades for a while and everything. So you would just remove the screws. And I like using these little handy little cups so that I don't lose anything. The last one's a bugger. It's in the corner in this This computer still has a modem. Remember the old 56K modems? Well, that's how small they got at the end. But remove that and we get the last screw out. Like that. It lifts straight up. And then straight out. And then you want to, of course, you want to blow this out and clean it a little bit. Get some air and clean it out. Okay, once you have the board out of the machine, you can remove the RAM, and it's very easily. You just lift up on those levers and take your RAM sticks out. The difference in color is because I upgraded her RAM on this. I think it came with 2 or 4, and I think it came with 2, and I put an extra 4 in there. And a CPU too, because I'll be having to put that on the new motherboard. This is an AMD. And it has a little fan clip there. Take it off. And there's your CPU. Open up the lever. Lift it off. And don't touch any of the pins on the back or bend any of those. AMD still has pins, or it did at this point. It had pins. And what I do is clean off the thermal compound and put new ones on when I'm going to install it in a different motherboard. Now I got a nice clean CPU. This is an Athlon 2. AMD Athlon 2, and it is a 2400. I believe that's a dual core that runs about 3 gigahertz. But I'll give you the specs later. So that's ready to go into the new machine. It's been about a week since I tore down that computer. Now I have the motherboard. Ordered the exact one, and for whatever reason my order was canceled, money returned. Researched it again, found another one. It was an HP with the same number. Actually, it was a different color board, but it had the same number, so I figured it would match. So what follows is me installing it. Pretty impressive, wrapped in an anti-static bag. Very impressive. Now I have a compact, and HP and compact were the same. Oh, it gave me the CPU too. It's pretty neat. I think it's going to work. Okay, the first board I ordered was the exact same thing. The guy was going to send the RAM, the CPU, and even the case for 60 bucks. And then a week later, it was canceled and gave me my money back, so I don't know what happened. So luckily, I found another one. Again, I matched the number of the board, different color, because this was compact. This is HP, owned by the same company. This one has 4 memory slots where the other one only had 2, no big deal. As long as everything lines up on the case in the back, we should be good to go. Get all your wires out of the way here before you put the motherboard in. This guy sold me the CPU and the board for 60 bucks. I didn't get the RAM or the case, but gently insert the board in. line up the holes outside. Make sure all your holes line up. So far, so good. You're lined up with the holes, your screw holes. Pretty close, so sure a little bit maneuvering and we should be able to get it done. Remember, we didn't lose them. Catch one in the back. When you start them, just put them in loosely, don't tighten them all the way. Once the board's in, next thing you want to do is seat your CPU. You want to do is you want to put some thermal paste on here. And all you need is a little bit of about the size of a pea. And then you just want to spread it out. Kind of evenly. Try not to get it on anything else, kind of like that. You want to put your CPU fan on, make sure it's cleaned up. I blew it out, dusted it. Locate the CPU fan power connector, it's right here. Once you get it snapped on, make sure it's tight, fit. Don't forget to plug in fan. I'm going to put my RAM in the outside slots. Actually, should use the inside slots closer to the CPU. That was the old way of doing it. Make sure you put them in right. Problem was the compact board, even though it had the same motherboard number, took DDR3, and the HP that I got on eBay takes DDR2. Luckily, I have some and it's AMD only. Hopefully it's going to work. That looks like that's going to work, but it must be set up different, so I see it down there. Okay, looks like all our connections are made. Let's see if it boots up. Well, the system booted up and went through a screen. I had to hit F2 because the HP board must have another fan. It said the system fans failed, although the only fan this thing has is the CPU fan, and it's working fine, and of course the fan and the power supply, which is working. So that shouldn't be a problem, and it's finding all the drivers. I guess there's going to be, might be a little bit different. Let's see. Okay, was it worth trying to fix this computer? In this case, absolutely. The parts only cost around $60. I was able to even fix the little boot up problem I was talking about earlier about the fan. I found a fan that would work. It didn't fit in the case properly, but I rigged it so I got one screw in it, and then I use a zip tie on another, and it's very light, so it's not going to rattle, it didn't make any noise, and was able to plug it into the fan header that's on the board, so that worked out fine. Now in this case, I also had the RAM that it needed. Because the first board was canceled on me, I didn't research enough to see if the RAM was the same. I was assuming it was because of the motherboard numbers were matched. So luckily enough, I do enough upgrades that I had some RAM that would work in it. So my suggestion is, if you're going to do this, make sure it's the right socket for the CPU. And if it's an AMD, you could go to AMD's website. If it's an Intel processor, go to Intel's, and it'll tell you the exact board that takes that processor. And make sure that the RAM is correct, because not only is DDR2, 3, and 4 different, it doesn't even fit in the board. They have different pins on the motherboard slots, so it's not going to work. So hope this helps. If you're planning on fixing an older computer, this probably will get another 2 or 3 years out of life out of this one. And thanks for watching, and talk to you next time.